Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brendan Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys during Oregon State's bye week. What we may say is the most ill-timed bye week of this year, considering where the Beavers are at. But that's a conversation.
Just play the game on one. Just play the part two of the Pac-2 championship on Wednesday. We did it during COVID with the NFL season. There is a will, there is a way. Let's just get it done, get it over with, get to the end.
The problem with that is, Ryan, Washington State is probably going to need that game to reach bowl eligibility. They got James Madison this weekend, 9-1, so it's shaping up to be a like do or die situation for the Cougs. Because if you're asking me as a betting man, I think James Madison takes down the Cougs. Cougs enter that game against the Beavers 5-6. All the pressure on the Cougs to get win number 6 against the Beavers. Oregon State, as we saw against Tulsa, outside of Tristan Taia, who we'll mention a little bit later in the podcast, not a whole lot of positives to go on, but nevertheless, folks, this is a bye-week podcast. Ryan and I are going to be talking mostly coaching search today as we are getting you guys ready because 2025 season, as we've talked about, it is what it is at this point. You know, it ain't going to get any better. It ain't going to, I suppose it could get worse, but I'm not sure how it could get much worse than the Tulsa game. That all being said, the good news is, folks, things are happening. Irons are in fires. Zoom interviews are being conducted. We're starting to hear some actual concrete things starting to move with Oregon State's coaching search. We're going to dive into it throughout this podcast. We're also going to touch base on some hoops action as well, as Ryan Harlan made the journey down to Matthew Knight Arena for the men earlier this week. Also been keeping tabs with the Oregon State women's basketball. I have to ask Ryan, folks, if he knows and if he can explain to me, like I'm 5, what 6 and 7 means, because I've had.
I can't. Sure, I'm older Gen Z, but I can't, man.
Okay,
It means nothing. But like even Scott Ruick answered that post game the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, I have a middle schooler at home, and I've been taught what that means." So it was like to hear Scott say that was hilarious. He basically said that for those two free throws that Tiara Bolden shot there, like that was the most high pressure situation that she has been in. So that tells you how Scott felt about that. But he was like he loved to see the reaction from the kids when it did reach
it went
points.
nuts, and it went nuts, and I have to say it's one of the coolest things that Oregon State women's basketball does that each year, has a game during the day that they can bring kids from all around the area. This goes all the way back to when I was, a student at Oregon State. It's a fantastic deal, and God bless the youth of America, Ryan, because like I said, I had Brogan, our fellow writer here at BeaversEdge.com. Brogan's 20, younger than you, younger than me. I had him I was Michael Scott. I'm like, explain this to me like I'm 5. And he's like, it just is kind of a meme. And I'm like, Lordy, you're getting old when the memes start to pass you by. But nevertheless, good win for the ladies this week as well in that classroom game. We'll talk a little bit hoops a little bit later in the podcast, but let's settle in, Ryan, for what we know as far as the coaching search. And again, want to make sure to let you guys know for all the latest stuff, make sure you go over to BeaversEdge.com. You can join for just $1, get in on all the coaching search stuff. You can join for $1. I guarantee you're going to love the content that Ryan, Dylan, and I put out. You want to stay around anyway, whether that's Ryan's takeaways from basketball games or takeaways from football games, everything in between. Beaver's Edge is your place to be, and especially with the coaching search news.
Games.
I know, right? But hey, Ryan, we are of the people, and we deliver for the people, man.
Hey, as a self-proclaimed college football sicko, I will watch Beavs and Cougs in 2 weeks. So I know what I'm doing with my Saturday.
Absolutely. But yeah, so again, just going back, you can join Beaver's Edge, get all the latest stuff, and stay locked in on the damn board for all the latest conversation with Oregon State fans discussing the coaching hire. There's been a lot of debate so far, and just a lot of differing opinions, which I absolutely love. And I think that's what makes the damn board great, is getting some people who are like, this would be a home run hire. Others who are like, I got some real questions here. And I think that's what makes the community that is Oregon State so special. And despite the tough season that it was, Ryan, Beavers were a resilient group of fans, man. And I got to give it to Oregon State fans, because as tough as this season's been, the optimism for the new coaches there, the excitement for the new coaches there, unlike, what we maybe discussed several weeks ago, It doesn't look like the fan base is just going to turn and stop donating and all these, things like it. The Beavers still care. There's still fundamental support, all these things. And I think that should give folks a lot of excitement because with what we're going to say now, the Beavers are shooting big. So we'll go ahead and reveal, and I think it's kind of been put out there that Oregon State has shown interest in Alabama assistant Jammarcus Shephard. That's been something that's kind of been out there in the public sphere. We have a little bit more detail that I don't want to give away that we have for our Beavers Edge subscribers, but he's a name, kind of, I would say, Ryan, the loudest name so far. Would you disagree?
No, not really. I mean, that's kind of where, where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of smoke right now for Shepard's name in this coaching search. And for people that kind of look at it, they're like, okay, what's the tie, right? Like he was on DeBoer's staff at Washington, and then also too back in the day was the wide receivers coach on Mike Leach's staff back at Wazoo. So there is some ties there to the West Coast, and that's something that Scott Barnes is looking for out of this next head coach for the Beavers. But at the same time, though, I understand the reservations of like, well, he's not been a head coach before. I'm like, and to that I say, yeah, that's a fair concern. But then again, with if you look 45 minutes south of here of Corvallis, look who's the head coach of the Ducks. Dan Lanning
Right.
was never a head coach before he was hired. So it's not necessarily like the perfect apples to apples comparison by far, right? But there would have to be, I think, a lot to go right in order for him to hit the ground running in year one. But the recruiting prowess and chops
Sure.
are there, and and for some cases of like Shepard's decision to, if he's eventually the guy, right? Like big job, it's like, well, he might want to come back to the West Coast. The motivations for people are very different in terms of taking these kind of jobs, and this might be the one where it's like, hey, look, like this is an environment that I want to be in, and I think it's a really good fit to see success early on to start my head coaching career. So that's the way I kind of look at it in terms of like both sides of it, where I'm like, it would be, more of a younger head coach, good
Sure.
recruiting prowess, which is what you need, especially to come here to Corvallis and a hard place to recruit already. But also, I understand the reservations that people have, though, of like, well, Barnes did say that he wants somebody that's been experienced to run the enterprise,
Right.
using that buzzword there.
It's true.
So there's kind of both sides of it, kind of how I look at it. But like, I wouldn't be too you know like feel one way or another about it. I think if Barnes and the committee decide that he's the guy, it's just more of a matter, I think, of like, we only know what we know so far of
Right.
kind of interviews that are set with him. And if he's wowed in that interview, then we'll see kind of what happens going forward. But this is kind of my general thoughts on Shepard so far.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, and I think, you kind of mentioned some key things there too, Ryan. I think one thing to note, as you mentioned, Shepard, obviously, I believe the Fort Wayne, Indiana native, but has spent time on the West Coast, obviously. I think there is this, and maybe you can speak to this to an example, Ryan. We're starting to hear more, and this isn't completely related, but just kind of something that I've noticed because I've recently heard like sometimes coaches are looking out for where they think their family would be best situated too, right? And I go back to a couple years back when Kalen DeBoer, for example, first took the job at Alabama. And there was a bit of a time when Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator now at Bama, was kind of in an in-between. And it wasn't, and he ended up did going with Kalen DeBoer to Alabama for like 2 weeks, but then immediately went to Seattle as their offensive coordinator. And instantly there was like, well, why? And you learned afterwards, as it turned out, and again, just reported, don't have it firsthand, that Ryan Grubb's wife and daughter really liked the West Coast lifestyle and weren't so much into the Tuscaloosa lifestyle, which, Ryan, you being on the East Coast in your life, can tell me there's a big difference in just overall vibes. There's a big difference in humidity. There's a big difference in, just lots of things, right? And from what it's been able to gather. It's kind of interesting that Jammarcus Shephard, from what we've heard on pretty good authority, would be like he would take the job if offered. And Alabama's a pretty good situation. So there was something about Corvallis, Oregon State, the West Coast, Ryan, that clearly appeals to him from what we've heard.
Yeah, and speaking from kind of my experience, right? And it's more circumstantial than anything else. Like I grew up in Virginia, lived there for 18, 20 or so years, right? Like, like it's more of I think at that point, at that time when I was a senior in high school, I was kind of looking for something different at that point. It just seemed to be where like there was a natural progression to
Sure.
my time living there, and I was like, I need to go somewhere and explore and be, somebody different than just being like the person that people knew me, being in high school, like high school
Sure.
me and me now, completely different people. So just those new experiences, experiencing the other side of the world, of just like trying to be a more well-rounded person than just being stuck in one spot for most of my life, like, and that's not to like say that that's a bad thing. It's like for people that do that, love an area and love being around, like in Northern Virginia especially, it's, yeah, more power to you. But like growing up, I've always been kind of, more of a West Coast kid to a degree, and just that I think comes from like, being able to spend time with family in New Mexico, getting to travel to different places and states, and just being on the West Coast was more kind of my speed and more of the environment that I really, started to kind of vibe with. And there was an adjustment. There was a big adjustment
Sure.
starting out college here, but like at the
So,
same time
yeah.
though, it's just more of a like my thing was a little bit different in the factors at play as to why I eventually came out here. I mean, the only school I got accepted to was James Madison, which, Cougars are playing James Madison. Uh, so that's going to be a fun game that I'll tune into. But like, I saw so many people I went to high school with and like that I knew that I grew up with. I was like, it's just, it wasn't the vibe. It wasn't kind of what I was looking for. And I
Yeah.
eventually chose here when it was literally the first visit where I stepped foot on the campus. Was like, yep, this is it.
Yeah, and again, that's a unique perspective for me, Ryan, because as I again, I'm no shame to admit it, third generation beef. Like grandpa and dad went to Oregon State, and I did too. And very pleased to do what I do now. And it's like I say to a lot of people, I got a dream job and get to cover the team that I grew up around and all those things. But my question to you, Ryan, is from those, because you look at it, it's only his year at Washington State in 2016, and then his 2 years with DeBoer at UW in 2022 and 2023, that Shepherd spent time on the West Coast. Do you think in that time, and then obviously since moving back to Alabama, he was like, well, when I get to being a head coach, maybe I would look at opportunities on the West Coast because I really vibed with things out there. Is that something we could kind of a straw we could grasp here? Because I'm seeing maybe something there. I mean, obviously the desire to be a head coach, all those things, but typically it would be, I think, a bit of a surprise if Oregon State hired someone from Alabama. I think that would be a pretty big pull.
Oh yeah, it would be a big pull, but also too, I think personal motivations versus what a job gives you. I
Sure,
think at the
sure.
end of the day, like those are the things that I think people wrestle with in those kind of positions. I mean, obviously you mentioned Grubb doing that himself, but I think though for Coach maybe in Shepard's case, it's may I would say maybe leaning a little more that way, and that's kind of just speculating off of the vibe I kind of get a little bit from kind of his motivations if he were to take the job. And I don't really fault him for that either, right? Like it's just more of a, I think, what motivates him and what
Right,
that comes down to at the end of the day. Because like, yeah, Alabama's a good spot, but also if you want to be a head coach, you also need to chart your own path. I mean, Kurt Signetti was
right,
on Saban's staff at Alabama, and he wanted to be a head coach, but like he knew like he would have to go take another job in order
right. It's a great pull.
to be a head coach, and eventually worked up from D2 to being now the head coach at Indiana, right? Like,
And dominating.
yeah. So that's something there where it's like, sure, Alabama's a great job, but like if you want to be a head coach, you need to kind of go off the beaten path a little bit in order to get to that spot. And that
Sure.
might be just, taking the Oregon State job, sticking around for a couple of
Yeah.
years or so, and then maybe finding your next spot eventually. Because like the one thing I think we all need to like be on the same page about, and I think more Beaver fans are starting to kind of understand, it's like you're not going to get a for lifer at all. Like you're going to get somebody at most that probably sticks around 2, 3, maybe 4 years, give or take, right? But like if you can get a four lifer, awesome. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But like realistically, you're not.
Yeah,
So
I
it's like
mean,
if Shepard is gonna if he takes the job and comes in and turns things around in 2 to 3 years, I think you could say that you're in a better spot realistically than what you
yeah,
were
I mean,
before you hired him.
is James Madison a better spot? Like would they have rather been like, nah, we don't need Kirk Sicknet? Like he built that culture. That culture sustained even after he left. And again, maybe, and again, I'm just we're throwing out some other names too. Maybe if you hired Paul Christ where he's at in his career, maybe you would have a lifer. If he
Yeah.
succeeded, right? I mean, I think there's some ambiguity a little bit. At the same token, let's say you went the route and hired Brett Vegan, right? Who's had a ton of success at Montana State. He's shown a good bit of loyalty to Montana State. Maybe if he came to Oregon State, he had a little bit of success. Maybe he wouldn't jump at the first or second opportunity, but then if he had extended success, Ryan, and someone threw life-changing money at him, like Signetti just got at Indiana, again, I think it goes back to the Jonathan thing a couple years ago. Could Jonathan have handled it a million better ways?
Oh yeah.
1,000%. A trillion percent. In some respects, like I said, he's still kind of Johnny the Slithering Snake to me. However, at the same token, though, I'd like to ask any of y'all, even including Ryan. Ryan, if I got a job offer that was 3 times what I make here, right, life-changing money or anything else, who wouldn't seriously consider that, right? I think that's just human nature, and people can go, oh, enough money is enough money and all those things. Yeah, people who are saying that, Ryan, aren't people who are millionaires anyway. So again, I think it's
And then on
hard.
top of that, the other thing I want to add, like
Sure.
with these coaches, a lot of them are, competitors at heart. They
Right.
are wired different. They're always looking for the next opportunity to succeed and to get better at what they do. Like
And you don't think
you
money's
probably,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
money's a big factor in that. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
James Franklin, for example, like had Penn State not fired him, right? Like he
Yeah.
probably would still be there right now. But like the fact that he's now at Virginia Tech and Virginia Tech hired a guy of Franklin's caliber, like there are kids that were previously offered by Franklin's staff who are now like seriously considering Virginia Tech
Right.
and like from like California too, especially. Like I saw quarterback uh in I think I want to say 2026 or 27 that was offered by Franklin staff that now has a prediction to go land at Virginia Tech. It's like that never for Virginia Tech as a football brand, like ooh,
Right.
that's never happened before. So it's like these guys are looking for that next opportunity to make, programs better and also to competitors at heart. Like Dan Lanning is wired differently as a head coach. Like that man
I,
is kind of psychotic a little bit to a degree.
yeah.
Like the fact
I
that he
I
does not like wear rain gear on the
right.
sideline and is in a sweatshirt and is just sitting in that, like that's a different level of wired. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
mean
Like, yeah.
it's tough to have mutual admiration for your bitter rival, but I'll say this, I think Oregon State needs somebody with a little bit of that zip and pop, and I'll just say this, just because it's been thrown out a little bit. I'm not going to reveal any details, but if you want to know if Oregon State is actively talking with Will Stein, Tosh Lapoy, head on over to BeaversEdge.com. We got a little bit of scoop that is, exclusive to us for now. So again, I think Oregon State shooting high, shooting low, but shooting high. I didn't mean to say shooting low, but shooting high as far as wanting to have a wide range of candidates. And again, like I've said, we expect them to talk to a lot of names, and we expect more Zoom interviews to come this week. We've confirmed a couple, but based on timeline, Ryan, and I kind of want to wrap up the coaching thoughts with this, and then we'll talk a little hoops and Tristan Taia to close out the podcast. But as far as timeline goes, I go back to when they hired Jonathan Smith, right after that whole situation, and ultimately when they hired Trent Bray. I would be pretty shocked if we don't know who the coach is going to be that Monday after the Washington State game, because that seemingly kind of seems to be, maybe it gets pushed into a day that week, but just knowing what we know with the portal and all that, it's tantamount. They need to have somebody in place that first week of December.
Yeah, the sense of urgency is there. I mean, you gotta get a guy like
Soon.
yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that they're gonna get a guy before that, but it's like you need to get a guy like yesterday,
Yeah.
basically, because you're not only having to recruit, new players coming in, but you need to also be able to recruit guys and retain some talent on that roster if you're the next coach. Like,
Right.
is it gonna happen? I don't know how much you can retain, but like that's one of those things where like you need to get a guy to start doing that like now, basically.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like Ryan said, because you've got guys, and we've heard that guys are starting to look at options as far as guys are going to be looking for representation. Guys are going to, I mean, think about it. We just talked about it, human nature, right? If Ryan and I are sitting here being like, okay, going through the motions, one more bye week, one more game, y'all don't think some of the players are doing that too? Some of the players are already starting to look at their next,
Yeah.
location, destination, should they want to leave. And most importantly, you need this coach to be in place so he can come in, have his meeting with the team, and therefore you, based on his opening speech, Ryan, and his conversations, he will be able to keep some players. That's just the reality of it. Now, the question is how many? We don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a mass exodus, but again, using Washington State as a guide from last year, Ryan, it looked like Jake Dickert took everything valuable with him from Pullman to, oh gosh, Winston-Salem, North Carolina for Wake Forest. Yet, strangely enough, Washington State was able to rebuild. They were able to almost bring in an entire new roster under Jimmy Rogers, and they're one win away from a bowl game when they've played a really tough schedule too. So I think that's also proof in the pudding, Ryan, that you can get competitive quicker than you think.
Yeah, I mean that's the day and age of transfer portal, right? Like either you can be really good right off the bat, or it might take a bit, and it might take some kind of ebbs and flows, a little bit of building out a roster and fleshing that out. But yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, I think, here in the future, just like what the roster will look like, how many guys are going to depart before, we officially know who's the next head coach.
Absolutely. And again, make sure to stay locked into BeaversEdge.com for all the latest regarding the coaching search. Ryan and I will keep you guys apprised on the damn board as we continue to touch our sources, see what's going on, and ultimately, just continue to find you guys more and more info. So ultimately, that's kind of it for the football side of things, and we'll keep scheming, Ryan and I say, college football sickos over here, Ryan, just scheming away.
Yeah,
But
yes, yes.
nevertheless, last few minutes of the podcast, want to make sure to obviously touch on Oregon State men's and women's basketball. Ryan, want to give you the floor here too. Obviously, just kind of recap. The men suffered their first loss this season. Tough game against a pretty good Oregon squad. And then obviously on the women's side, Oregon State remains undefeated after the classroom game. And what's to come for both squads?
I mean, for the men's, that's kind of how I expected the game to go. To be quite honest, I mean, it was the Nate Biddle and Jackson Shellstat show.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense, and really, like that group maybe could have played. Well, no, not could have. Definitely could have played a lot better, for sure. That's the way that I kind of looked at that. I mean, fouls were an issue, but you overcome that. They overcame that in the first half, but they were just really like not following through on the little things. That's what Wayne Tinkle kind of said afterwards. And the rebounding department is the biggest issue right now for that men's team. They cannot rebound to save their lives now with their bigs. Like if Des White and Jojo Lake are leading the team in rebounds or tying with the 6'11 big
Yeah,
in rebounds in this case, like that's
not
not
it.
winning basketball, man, like at all. But Wayne basically said though that there's going to be a lot of changes going forward. Look for Malcolm Christie, especially to be one of those guys that could get into the starting five for this group in the Virgin Islands. Like I just saw, speaking of Christie, look at his Instagram story. They are currently in the U.S. Virgin Islands right now, so
What I
they're
wouldn't give.
officially they're officially ready to go
What I
for
wouldn't
their
give.
tournament coming up. And then on the women's side, yeah, Scott Ruick, orange collar basketball, man. I mean, like that group is so deep, talented. They got a really tough test against a good Colorado State team coming up, but like, I mean, Laura Alonso, the freshman from Spain, buy stock now. That's all I'm gonna
How,
say on her. Like, she is
yeah.
talented. Like for
How,
being a freshman, yeah.
how have you seen the team respond since Kat's injury, Ryan? I was curious your thoughts on that too.
Oh, I mean, they're playing selfless basketball. That's basically what they're doing, right? Like, I mean, Tiara is gonna give you multiple points a night, like had 23 against Utah State,
Mm.
but like the she's going to be your number one scoring option. But like you got Jenna Villa, you got Nene Sal, you also have uh Kennedy Schuler too that can give you points and
Yep.
facilitate really well. So it's really one of those where like there's going to be somebody that will get their hot hand. In the case of the Utah State game, that was Bolden, and then everybody else kind of pitching in and doing what they can to propel the team to a win. So I think if Cat were healthy, this team would be cooking with gas right now.
Yeah. I
That
mean,
is how I would see this group right now. But like at the same time though, Brendan, like if Cat was healthy, I don't know if we would know what we know about Laura so far
I
throughout the
mean,
course of this. I know we're only
yeah,
what 4 games in, right?
yeah.
Like, but still, like it's one of those where um I just think that like we'll just kind of have to see how things go. This group's still learning, they're still improving, and early on though, first impressions, I like what I see from this group. They're definitely a reason why that I think they're going to finish at the top of the WCC this year, and yeah, Ruick doesn't rebuild, he reloads.
He is a treasure, and I've said for a while, can Oregon State might want to get a statue of Scott Ruick up somewhere in the Gill Coliseum Plaza
That
at some
that
point.
that that I want to say that photo of him with a paper cup, that should be the statue, or the him jumping when they cut down the nets of the WCC tournament last
Yeah.
year. Those are the two that I would like to propose as being the statue.
Yeah, they could certainly be in the mix. And again, that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Edge podcast. The last thing we want to mention with just a few seconds left, Brendan and Ryan say Tristan Taia starts against Washington State next week. We'll
Please,
obviously
please.
discuss
Callan
that.
Guttridge is the backup. Please,
We'll
please. I will
discuss
take that
that
any day of the week.
on the podcast next week. Again, big thanks to Ryan Harlan for joining me, talking some coaches. Make sure you stay locked into BeaversEdge.com for all the latest on Oregon State's coaching search and much, much more. Thanks, guys.